Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this next video that you're going to watch. As you can see behind us, we are here in Anaheim, California. We're not here for the Angel game though. We're here for UFC 241. Whatever video you're watching right now, please enjoy it because it will be good. It will be hard not to enjoy. And Eric, what else are they supposed to do?
Raise a glass in the sky and salute the ring generals.
And of course, like, subscribe, and comment. We are live here at UFC 241. You can see behind us the Honda Center here in Anaheim. We're recording this a couple days before UFC 241, but this is going to be the first ever on-location version of the UFC show presented by the Ring Generals. I'm Nick Nenad.
I am Eric Santos.
And we are super excited to see these fights, and we're super excited to talk about them as well. Of course, we have Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic for the Heavyweight Championship of the world. Nate Diaz returning on this card versus Anthony Pettis, and Yoel Romero versus Paulo Costa. A fight that should have happened 4 times previous is finally going to happen here in Anaheim, barring people making weight, of course. And those two guys, they might be risking missing weight possibly.
Yeah, you know, it's the thing. I think the thing is that I am really excited for Nate Diaz's return. I haven't seen him fight since really Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
And he's been kind of like, he's still training, that's for sure. But is it enough to take on Anthony Pettis? We'll have to see. Stay tuned for that.
I know. And of course, you know, Paulo Costa and Yoel Romero, who we just were talking about, freaks of nature in their own.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see that one just because anytime Yoel Romero is in a fight, I'm down because you never really know what's going to happen. The guy's a freak of nature. There's a reason he's called the Soldier of God, which I think is the best nickname in all of UFC.
No, definitely. He's one of those guys that you need to look out for. Yoel Romero impressed me with Robert Whittaker. A fight that I wish, maybe we would have seen here at the Honda Center. But, hey, Paulo Costa, we'll see what happens with this fight.
No, exactly. And then, of course, Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic. How could you not be excited about not only a heavyweight title fight, but Daniel Cormier in a heavyweight title fight versus somebody that he knocked out the last time they faced, which was over a year ago. I'm super excited about that one as well.
Anything could happen because Stipe's been out for almost basically a year. So does Stipe have that fire inside to take on DC and to get back his heavyweight championship? Or DC, is this his last fight ever? We'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's a big thing. And we're going to get to that at the very end of this show, what we think is going to happen with Daniel Cormier, whether he wins or loses after this fight, because that is a big story. It's not something that we're going to gloss over. But we're just going to go over these main events fights that we were talking about. We're going to start with Yoel Romero and Paulo Costa. Yoel Romero, he had that big fight against Robert Whittaker that we watched together.
Yeah.
And I really thought he had a chance in that fight, but Robert Whittaker just, he's an animal. So he was able to win. What do you expect from Yoel Romero? Because Paulo Costa, he's Paulo Costa, right? He's a veteran of the UFC. I think Yoel Romero, at least in my opinion, is just on a different level, though.
Yoel Romero, he's a freak of nature. He's one of those guys, a great wrestler, striker. Any of those punches will knock you out, that's for sure. Paulo Costa, is he enough? Does he have a good chin? And does he have good grappling techniques?
Very good point.
To counteract most of his movesets that Yoel Romero brings to the table. Yoel Romero, will this definitely be able to help him out in the long run? Will he be able to ragdoll Paulo? For sure, and all night long.
Yeah, and the one thing I think that's a little disappointing about this fight that it's only 3 rounds.
Yes.
Right, because I feel like you mentioned the chin. Does Paulo Costa have the chin? We know Yoel Romero has the chin, so it's almost like how long will this fight go? We almost wish it was 5 rounds, but you know the way the UFC is, you can't have every fight 5 rounds because the pay-per-view will go super long.
For long, yeah.
Exactly. So, and especially for people watching on the East Coast, it gets into the wee hours of the night when you're watching those fights. But nonetheless, that's not necessary to talk about. Here's the thing, though. So when we're looking at this fight, you mentioned the chins of both the guys. What do you think happens? Do you think this goes the distance? Do you think it doesn't? And of course, who wins this fight?
It goes the distance. If I have to go with one guy, I'll have to go with the Soldier of God, Yoel Romero.
Yoel Romero, and I'm going to agree with him as well. I'm a big Yoel Romero fan, and my bias might hit in a little bit here. I just think he's a level above Paulo Costa. And, I just think he's going to be able to win. I do believe it will go all 3 rounds, like you mentioned. And I believe you're going to hear you're going to hear Romero's name in the title picture again at middleweight. Maybe you'll see the winner of the Adesanya Robert Whittaker fight face Yoel Romero next fight if he's able to win, and we both believe he's going to be able to win. So we're behind Yoel Romero here at the Honda Center, and we will be here watching that live. Next, you obviously have, wow, this is almost an impossible fight to predict, Anthony Pettis versus Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz seems to be on the top of his game, even though he hasn't fought a lot in the last couple of years. Anthony Pettis, we know, is just a gamer. He's a guy that's down to fight. Reminds me of Fit Finlay back in the day. For professional wrestling, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
But, you know, this is another fight. Hard to predict. Here's my question to you. What do we see from Nate Diaz? Is he going to care? Or does he want bigger fights? Like, what do you see from Nate Diaz in this fight?
There's no question and there's no doubt that these guys just hate each other. They hate each other. These guys just have a dislike for each other. And I know Nate Diaz, he wants to finish this fight quick. He's not sitting on his butt. He wasn't sitting on his butt for the past 3 years since his last fight between Conor McGregor. I'm pretty sure it was 3 years. But it's been a while since we've seen Nate Diaz in the octagon. So, with that being said, he's got his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu background, his boxing techniques to take on Anthony Pettis, which of course, any of those nasty kicks will definitely knock you out in maybe the first round or second round if Nate Diaz is not prepared. Nate Diaz is a tough guy. Nate Diaz is the kind of guy who just doesn't want to stop. And he's more of a brawler, if you ask me. He just wants to end the fight quick. Is it enough to take on Anthony Pettis? That's why I see this fight so unique, because these two guys, you know, the hate, the animosity, and the dislike for each other is there. These guys are going to tell a great story, that's for sure. But if I have to go with a guy really who I feel like who's been out of the game, but who's been still training, Nate Diaz will come out on top second round.
One thing about this fight is, again, I believe it's 3 rounds, correct?
Yes.
So Nate Diaz in the past says he wants entertaining fights. He's talked shit on Tyron Woodley and Kamaru Usman for being boring fighters. Yeah. And he doesn't want to fight those guys because the fight's going to be boring. Anthony Pettis is not one of those guys.
No, he's not.
He will knock out, drag it out with the best of them. And of course we know Nate Diaz will. So this fight is not going the full 3 rounds. I believe it goes second round as well. I'm going to go with the upset, though. I'm going to go Anthony Pettis defeats Nate Diaz. I think he has more at stake in this fight, and I believe he'll catch Diaz. Diaz has a tough chin, and one of the reasons they'll get into the second round is because these guys can take punches. But nonetheless, I do believe in the end, Anthony Pettis, who's been in the game, you know, more recent than Nate Diaz, I think Anthony Pettis will surprise the Honda Center in the UFC world with an upset victory. Because, you know what, to be honest, it doesn't really matter if Nate Diaz wins this fight or not. Anyways, not saying he's not going to be ready. I just think Pettis needs this fight. Diaz doesn't. So I'm going to go Pettis wins the fight.
It's one of those things where you need to check out, because we haven't seen Diaz fight in a long time. And I do believe that these guys are going to bring something special inside that Honda Center. Exactly. So that is something that you need to look forward to.
Saturday night.
Yes.
Speaking of Saturday night, the main event of the evening. Heavyweight championship of the world, the current champion, Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic. The last time both these guys fought, they fought each other, right? So there's the familiarity there. Stipe said he didn't want another fight until he got a rematch. He got his rematch a year later. Daniel Cormier didn't necessarily like that he did that. Cormier's been dealing with an injury. It's a little different. He's also a broadcaster as well. Yeah. And he's also the champ. The champ does what the champ wants to do. Of course. Yeah. So we have Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic. Cormier knocked out Stipe in their last fight. A very surprising result in my end, because Daniel Cormier is, of course, a wrestler.
Yes.
Right?
He just surprised me that night last year of July, the super fight. That was the main event. And to be honest, we all doubted DC, but the guy he just knocked out. Stipe won the heavyweight championship. The rest is history. We all thought DC was going to fight Brock Lesnar, but Brock Lesnar, of course, that didn't happen. So now we're going to be able to see the rematch between Stipe Miocic and DC. The one thing that I really find very, interesting is that Stipe hasn't been fighting since that fight. He hasn't fought. So I just think to myself, is it going to be enough to take on DC and whatever wrestling background, tactics he's got to take down DC? Is it going to be enough? But I do believe that once you lose your belt and you do lose that one fight, it kind of fires, kind of fires you up. You want to like get that belt back. And so, with this rematch, anything is possible. DC and Stipe, these guys, they're both great wrestlers. This might be the end of DC's, fighting career. This might be his last fight. I don't know. If I had to pick somebody, I think I have to go with DC. I think he's going to come out on top. He's going to have his hand raised. They're going to go full 5 rounds, and the decision's going to go to DC.
Wow.
More wrestling tactics, more just completely, I know he's going to try to knock him down. But Stipe, he's also one of those guys who's trying to box as much as he can. He even calls himself like a boxer in one of his embedded blogs from UFC. He even said that I'm just a boxer. But really, I think he's going to try to like counter, the punches that DC has. So DC, he better watch out. But if I have to go with a guy, it's going to be DC coming out on top.
Yeah, DC's a monster. He's a beast. And he said in an interview with Ariel Helwani that the first time he faced Stipe Miocic, which is of course the July pay-per-view you mentioned last year, it was kind of an easy win for him, in his opinion. And I know that obviously has to anger Stipe Miocic. It would anger me or you if somebody said that about us. And what Cormier said was like, what did the knockout happen in? Was it the second round?
It was the second or third round.
Second or third round, yeah. Cormier likes to take first rounds to scout out his opponents like a boxer, like a true boxer would. So I believe this fight will have some length. I do believe it will go all 5 rounds. I don't think there's going to be much action, though, in the first 2 rounds. I think both guys are going to be scoping each other out because this is kind of Stipe's last shot for a while if he loses, and it's probably Cormier's last shot ever because he'll probably retire if he loses. So,
yeah, it would be a shame.
Yeah, well, he, of course, could go down and fight Jon Jones at 205 if he could fight for that title, technically. There's a forklift behind us to our left here, so if it gets a little bit loud, we'll try to edit the audio. But nonetheless, here we are live on a location, of course, so you don't know what the background's going to say. But Daniel Cormier, so I do believe this fight is going to go all 5 rounds, and I think Cormier is going to win. I think Cormier is going to do enough. He's going to box him. He's going to take him down enough. I just think that Daniel Cormier is the better fighter, and he'll win this fight. And then we'll see. And I really don't know what Cormier is going to do after this fight. We both believe he's going to win. So I toss it to you, Eric. What happens? What do you think, if you possibly could get into Daniel Cormier's head, what is going to happen when we are there after this fight is over, after he gets his hand raised, the announcement from Bruce Buffer, and he's being interviewed by Joe Rogan? What happens? What does he say?
If I was DC, and I know there is one guy who I really feel like has hindered him throughout, his fighting career, and a guy who's taunted him for years, and this guy is completely, when these guys go up against each other, there is something special, but there is also that hatred. DC interview.
It's probably the worst hatred possibly ever in UFC.
And DC has said that there are 3 guys that he would love to fight. Stipe, which is we're going to get. Brock Lesnar, which I don't think it's ever going to happen. And his arch rival, Jon Jones. And it's just one of those guys is that I think the obvious answer, and for every fight fan, would love to see, the conclusion of DC versus Jon Jones. Because if they were to go the 3rd time, it would be the 3rd and final time. And I think it would be appropriate if DC were to win that match against Jon Jones. I think that would be the better time for him to retire.
Well, of course. And I think no matter what, he has this fight versus Stipe and one more fight. And it probably has to be Jon Jones, or, if he decides to change his mind, Brock Lesnar. I think those are the only 2 fights that you have here. The more realistic one, since Brock has technically retired, is obviously Jon Jones. What I do believe is going to happen, I think Cormier is a showman. I think he knows what has to happen here. We saw him do the stuff with Brock after the July card, after he knocked out Stipe stunningly in the first fight they fought. So I do think he will put it up, and he will go to 205, and he will face Jon Jones if he wins the fight. We're predicting he wins, but of course if he loses, I think that's it. And I think that's his story. And nothing to say about Daniel Cormier if he ends up never beating Jon Jones and he decides to retire. We can't hate on the guy for that.
No.
Jon Jones is the best fighter ever, okay? Losing to the best fighter ever is not a terrible thing.
No,
you know,
not.
plenty of people lost to Muhammad Ali. Plenty of people have lost to, you know, Deontay Wilder in boxing.
Mike Tyson.
Yeah,
you know,
Mike
this
Tyson,
goes on,
exactly.
you know.
So, you know, there's a lot of that. And you don't want to take credit away from Daniel Cormier if he does decide to retire after this fight here at the Honda Center on Saturday. But as fans, we want to see it. And if Daniel, if you're somehow seeing this as well, we would love to watch a Jon Jones, Daniel Cormier third fight. It'd be big money. We know you don't need it. It'd be huge, huge money there. But so
It all
we
comes,
both.
yeah, it all comes down to, you know, give what the fans want.
100%.
That's what it is. You
We know it's a dangerous sport. We know Jon Jones could knock you into you know, Sunday night if he wanted to. But nonetheless, we got Cormier winning the fight, so we'll see what happens after. We disagree on Pettis and Diaz, which is probably a good thing for the fight. We really don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And then we both,
you know.
exactly. And then we both have Yoel Romero winning, and we're just going to talk about the main events today. So that is it for the first UFC show live on location here at the Honda Center in Anaheim. Of course, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment to this video and all the other videos. We have great content. We just recently did an interview with Eric Watts on location at Bar Wrestling. Eric Watts was a former Tough Enough competitor in the WWE, and he's currently an independent wrestler on the independent scene. And of course, you'll see my man here, Eric Santos, do his UFC stream. You'll see that coming out soon. And of course, we're always talking about WWE. You'll see a SummerSlam review video and NXT TakeOver review video, all coming up soon. But for the UFC show, I'm Nick Nenad.
I am Eric Santos.
And of course, raise a glass in the sky and salute the ring
Ring
generals.
generals.